English video assignment Sherlock Holmes by Victor and Victor. How are the main characters presented? Sherlock Holmes is presented as a passionate detective in control of himself. He is focused on the matter presented by the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State for European Affairs. He seems to know his capabilities and limitations and will only go into the case once he is intrigued, and in this case has the further details regarding the content of the letter. When interrogating Lord Bellinger and Trellaway Hope, he closes his eyes, mapping the different clues inside his head, a classic way for Sherlock Holmes to deduct. While being in control, Sherlock Holmes, played by Jeremy Brett, also has sporadic outbursts of energy and enthusiasm. This happens when being in the midst of a case, particularly when there is a breakthrough or the crime has been solved.
Dr. Watson functions as the linking element between Sherlock Holmes and the diplomats of the story, the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State. While Sherlock follows his own ethic code and deduction methods, Watson seeks to find a more conciliatory and delicate way of solving the crime, asking the more factual questions during the first interview.
Lady Hilda is presented as a remarkable and beautiful woman by Dr. Watson. She seems to have an interest in politics and her husband's affairs beyond what is considered normal at the time. She is therefore quite unique and does not fit into the gender roles of the Victorian age. In the episode, she develops an emotional bond with Sherlock. This causes Sherlock to act uncharacteristically when he hides the truth of the crime from the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State to protect Lady Hilda.
How is the case solved? The first essential thing Sherlock observes is that only few people know the content of the letter and let alone its whereabouts. When Dr. Watson reads about the death of one of those persons, Eduardo Lucas, it becomes clear that the death must be connected to the disappearance of the letter. Following this new lead in the case, Sherlock and Watson goes to inspect the crime scene, where they discover a peculiar anomaly. The bloodstain on the carpet has been shifted from the matching bloodstain on the floor. The carpet has therefore been removed following the incident. Tricking the police officer out of the room, Sherlock can quickly examine the floor, where he finds a small hatch, although there is nothing in it. This makes Sherlock certain that somebody has been at the crime scene after the death of Eduardo Lucas and has removed the letter. After he finds out that Lady Hilda was at the crime scene before them, by showing a picture of her to the police guard, it becomes clear that she must be the current holder of the letter.
What clues are presented to the viewer and how? There is a great similarity between the clues presented to the viewer and those presented to Sherlock and Watson. This also follows the rule of classic detective fiction made by S.S. Van Dyne, stating, "The reader has equal opportunity with the detective to solve the crime. All clues are plainly stated and described." Some of those clues are the shifted bloodstain on the carpet and floor, the newspaper article stating the death of Eduardo Lucas, who was previously mentioned by the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State, the visit from Lady Hilda on Baker Street, which later becomes an important part in solving the case, and the unknown lady, which we later find out is Lady Hilda visiting the crime scene of Eduardo Lucas' murder.
The scene where Lady Hilda visits Baker Street is colored by Sherlock's interpretation of her gesture after she leaves the room. The clue that is her restlessness and suppressed excitement only becomes clear to the viewer when Sherlock Holmes is suspicious towards Lady Hilda. How the clue is presented is therefore dependent on the way Sherlock Holmes sees the turn of events. This tendency is also seen in connection with other clues in the story.
Which of the classic detective fiction elements do you see? The story has many of the classic detective fiction elements presented by S.S. Van Dyne in his 20 Rules for Writing Detective Fiction Stories. For example, no willful tricks or deceptions are played on the reader other than those played legitimately by the criminal and the detective himself. There are some exceptions to the rules of SS Van Dyne. For example, the fact that Sherlock is not investigating murder. This means that there is no corpse to inspect or murderer to catch.
Compare with other detective stories and place the story into the history of the genre. Also, compare this version to the film adaptation from 2010, A Study in Pink. The Second Stain is part of the Sherlock Holmes universe created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle between 1880 and 1914. The stories of Detective Sherlock Holmes is successor of earlier detective fiction stories such as those of Edgar Allan Poe and his character C. Auguste Dupin. The Sherlock Holmes stories were the predecessor of the golden age of detective fiction in the 1920s and the 1930s, with authors such as Agatha Christie and Dorothy L. Sayers.
Compared to the film adaptation from 2010, A Study in Pink, The Second Stain has many differences. The characters, Sherlock Holmes and John Watson, are different. Holmes is more charming and not as autistic, although he still has a conventional way of solving crimes and has a knack for the details. At the end of The Second Stain, where he hides the letter in Swalloway Hope's wooden box, he shows a great deal of empathy towards Lady Hilda. This is something that wouldn't happen in the BBC remake. Watson has a smaller role in The Second Stain compared to A Study in Pink. He is more of a sidekick than a partner. His character is rather flat. Thank you. That was it. Goodbye.